While millions of soldiers were fighting in the First World War, another enemy was quietly spreading. It didn't use guns or bombs. Instead, it was a new type of influenza that spread quickly and eventually killed millions of people around the world. It became known as the Spanish flu, but this doesn't mean that the disease started in Spain. During the war, news was strictly controlled in many countries. Their governments didn't want the enemy to know that many soldiers and civilians were getting sick. Spain was neutral in the war. That's why their newspapers were freer to report about the outbreak. Because many of the first open reports came from Spain, other people thought that the disease started there. Until now, it's still not certain where the virus first appeared. According to the CDC, there is no single place that is recognized as its definite origin. One of the first major outbreaks was recorded in March 1918 at Camp Funston in Kansas, United States. This was a military camp where many American soldiers trained before being sent to Europe. More than 100 soldiers were the first to get sick. Within just 1 week, the number of cases increased by almost 5 times. But it's also possible that there were earlier cases in other places. There were reports about a strange respiratory illness in military camps in France and England even before 1918. There's also a theory that this might be connected to a respiratory illness that was seen in northern China. But there's not enough evidence to prove that any of these places is the true origin. What definitely spread the disease was the war. The soldiers were really packed tightly in barracks, ships, trains, hospitals, and trenches. If one of them got infected, the virus would quickly spread to those around him. Every day, thousands of soldiers and workers were transferred from one country to another. That's why the virus traveled with them. From the military camps, the disease reached the cities and communities. By the middle of 1918, there were already cases in North America, Europe, and some parts of Asia. Because of this, many offices became understaffed. Many families got sick at the same time. Even the soldiers on the battlefield became weak because of influenza. According to studies about the United States military, a large part of the Army and Navy got sick during the height of the pandemic. The crowded conditions and rapid movement of the soldiers helped spread it to different camps and countries. This is what is called the first wave. Many had fever, felt weak, and had body aches. But most recovered after a few days, and fewer died compared to the next wave. Because of this, many thought it was just an ordinary flu. They didn't know that the illness would return after a few months. And when it returned, it killed faster and was harder to stop. By August 1918, influenza returned. But the second wave was more dangerous. It was felt almost simultaneously at ports near Boston, in the United States, Brest in France, and Freetown in Sierra Leone. Because many ships, soldiers, and passengers passed through these places, the disease quickly reached different countries. The virus spread even faster because soldiers continued to travel during the First World War. On November 11, 1918, the war ended. But the pandemic did not end. Millions of soldiers and prisoners of war returned to their respective countries. Some of them carried the virus even though they were not yet experiencing any symptoms. Because of this, the disease spread even faster to cities, towns, and remote communities. It wasn't just the elderly and weak people who died. Many healthy young adults, including soldiers, developed severe pneumonia. In some cases, their lungs filled with fluid, making it hard for them to breathe. There was no flu vaccine back then. There were also no modern antibiotics that could treat bacterial pneumonia. Because of this, hospitals quickly became overcrowded. There was a shortage of doctors, nurses, beds, medicine, and even people to bury the dead. There were places where funerals happened day after day. Some families got sick all at once, so there was no healthy person left at home to take care of them. Many schools, churches, cinemas, and places where people gathered were closed. In some cities, large gatherings were prohibited. People were also advised to avoid crowds, cover their mouths when coughing, and stay at home when they were sick. In San Francisco, wearing a gauze mask in public was mandated, but masks alone were not enough. Many people used them incorrectly, and the thin masks at that time also provided limited protection. Nevertheless, according to studies, places that implemented combined measures early such as closing public spaces, banning large gatherings, isolating the sick, and reducing social interactions, were more effective. Because of this, the spread of infection was reduced a bit. Despite this, there was still a big problem with information. Because the war had just ended, many governments were used to controlling the news. In some places, the public was not immediately told how serious a disease was. That's why there were people who continued to go to work, ride crowded vehicles, and attend large gatherings, even though influenza was already spreading rapidly. By the fall of 1918, this was already the most dangerous part of the pandemic. In the United States, this was when the highest number of deaths was recorded. Worldwide, it's estimated that almost 1/3 of the population was infected during the entire pandemic. But even though so many had died, the virus still didn't completely disappear. The second wave weakened when winter came, but influenza returned again in 1919. It was no longer as deadly as the second wave in many places, but many still got sick and died. The second wave showed how quickly a disease can spread when many people travel at the same time. Communities are crowded, information is lacking, and there was not yet enough medicine or protection. And the biggest question is no longer just about how influenza spread. The more important question is, why did it kill more people than ordinary flu? There were people who got sick during the first wave, but survived. When the more deadly second wave came back, many of them were not severely affected anymore. This means it's possible that their bodies had already developed protection against the virus. This was observed in some military camps in the United States. Fewer soldiers who had already been infected during the first wave got sick and died, compared to those who had not been infected before. But this doesn't mean that everyone is already safe. There were still people who got reinfected, but the chances of developing severe pneumonia or dying were much lower. While many stories about the pandemic came from the United States and Europe, what happened in other parts of the world was even worse. One of the hardest hit was India. In September 1918, a more dangerous wave arrived in Bombay, which is now called Mumbai. From there, it quickly spread by train to different parts of the country. The population was very crowded, many people were weak due to hunger and poverty, and there were not enough doctors and hospitals. It is estimated that over 10 million people died in India. Some studies even suggest that the number of deaths reached around 16 to 17 million. That's why India is believed to have the highest number of deaths in a single country. From India, the virus also reached ships. From there, the soldiers and workers who were returning to their hometowns got infected and spread the virus. As they traveled, the disease spread from the ports into the interior of Africa. The health systems in many areas were weaker. There was a shortage of medicine, food, and doctors, and there was no proper way to count the number of deaths. Because of this, the actual number of victims may have been higher than what was recorded. Unlike the common flu, many who died in this pandemic were healthy young adults. Usually young children and the elderly are more at risk from influenza. But in 1918, the death rate was very high among people aged 20 to 40. Almost half of those who died from influenza were young adults. It's still not completely clear why. One possible reason is that their immune system response was very strong. Instead of just attacking the virus, the body's excessive reaction may have also damaged their lungs. Many also developed bacterial pneumonia after influenza. There were no antibiotics back then, so it was very difficult to treat this kind of infection. This had a huge impact on families and communities. Many parents, workers, soldiers, and people who were expected to care for and provide food for their families died. Workers like farmers were gone. Businesses, railways, and government offices were affected. There were children who became orphans and families who lost several members at the same time. This was not just a health crisis. This was also a big problem for jobs, food, transportation, and livelihood. And as influenza continued to spread in Asia and Africa, its unusual characteristic became more apparent. It did not only affect the weak, even young, strong, and healthy people could still die within just a few days. By early 1990, the worst spread of influenza had already subsided. But the pandemic was not completely over yet. The third wave arrived and cases increased again in some parts of America, Europe, and Australia. It was not as fast or as deadly as the second wave, but many people still got sick and died. There were also some places that experienced another increase in cases in 1920. Some historians call this the fourth wave. But up to now, there is still debate whether this was really part of the same pandemic or already a new outbreak of seasonal flu. One of the young children who died during this time was Rosalia Lombardo from Palermo, Italy. She was only 2 years old when she died in December 1920. Because of her father's deep sorrow, he had her body preserved. Until now, Rosalia can still be seen in the Capuchin catacombs in Palermo. Because she looks like she's just sleeping, she became known as one of the most beautiful preserved bodies in Europe. But there is a more important question that needs to be answered. What exactly was the virus that killed so many people? Scientists discovered that the cause was an influenza, a virus called H1N1. The H and N are two components on the surface of the virus. These components help the virus enter the body's cells and spread. According to subsequent studies, it has a strong resemblance to influenza viruses that come from birds. It is possible that it originated from a bird virus that mutated until it could infect humans. But it is still not certain which animals it originally came from or where the first transmission to humans happened. There was a previous theory that it may have come from pigs. But when scientists were able to reconstruct the genetic code of the virus, they found that its genes are closer to avian or bird influenza. In 2005, researchers successfully reconstructed the virus using genetic material obtained from previous victims. This was done in a tightly controlled, secure laboratory to understand why it was so deadly. They discovered that it could rapidly multiply in the respiratory system. It doesn't just stay in the nose and throat. It can go down to the lungs and destroy the cells needed to breathe properly. But it wasn't just the virus that killed many victims. In many cases, influenza first damages the lungs. When the lungs are weakened, bacteria can easily get in, and this leads to bacterial pneumonia. This is one of the main reasons why so many people died. There were no modern antibiotics in 1918. So even though doctors knew there was an infection in the lungs, they didn't have an effective medicine against it. There were patients who suddenly developed a fever, coughed, and had difficulty breathing. In severe cases, their faces turned blue or dark because their bodies lacked oxygen. Some also died because of an overly strong reaction from their immune system. The immune system is the body's defense against illness. But in some victims, its response became too strong. Instead of just attacking the virus, it also damaged the patient's own lungs. This is one possible reason why many healthy young adults became severely ill. Young adults have a stronger immune system, but when its reaction becomes excessive, it can worsen the damage to the lungs. In China, some local governments used traditional remedies. Some houses were sprayed with lime water and some plants were burned because they believed it could purify the air. Some people were also advised to drink mung bean soup and rock sugar, but there is no strong evidence that these methods prevented or cured influenza. There is also a theory that the death rate was lower in some parts of China because people might have had prior exposure to a similar virus. It's possible that they developed some immunity, but this has not been fully proven. So we can't say for sure that this is really the reason. In the end, it became clear why the influenza of 1918 was different. It spread quickly and could destroy the lungs. It opened the way for bacterial pneumonia. And in some people, the body's own defenses made the illness even worse. That's why it wasn't just a simple flu. This was a virus that could bring down even a strong and healthy young person in just a few days. But how exactly did the Spanish flu kill its victims? According to the analysis of thousands of autopsy records, most of those who died were not killed by the influenza virus alone. First, the virus attacks the airways and damages the inside of the lungs. When the damage becomes severe, bacteria that are usually found in the nose and throat can enter more easily. Bacteria such as Streptococcus pneumonia and Staphylococcus aureus cause severe bacterial pneumonia. The lungs become filled with pus and fluid, the tissue gets damaged, and the patient has an even harder time breathing. Studies show that secondary bacterial pneumonia, was the main cause of most deaths during the pandemic. This was a huge problem because there were no antibiotics back then. Even if the doctor saw that the patient already had a bacterial infection, they still didn't have an effective medicine to kill the bacteria. A smaller group of victims quickly experienced severe lung damage directly from the virus. In this condition, fluid leaks from the small blood vessels into the lungs. The parts of the lungs that should contain air gradually fill up. Because of the lack of oxygen, the patient's face turns blue or gray. It's like they're drowning, but the fluid comes from inside their own body. This is the reason why some patients suddenly get worse. They may be able to stand and talk in the morning, but have difficulty breathing by night. Another unusual characteristic of the Spanish flu was the number of young adults who died. Usually, influenza is more dangerous for young children and the elderly, but in 1918, there was a high death rate among people aged 15 to 34. There is a theory that some older people were more protected because they had already been exposed to an earlier influenza virus in the 19th century. It's possible that they retained some immunity that helped against the new virus, but it wasn't enough to fully protect them. This is why some healthy young adults died. Another possible reason is what's called a cytokine storm. Cytokines are small signals used by the immune system to call for other defenses in the body. When there's an infection, they trigger inflammation to fight the virus, but in some patients, the reaction becomes excessive. The body releases too many immune signals. Because of this, it gets worse and the lungs become more damaged. Instead of protecting the patient, his overly strong immune response may actually contribute to the damage of his own body. This could be one of the reasons why many strong and healthy people became seriously ill. But according to modern research, this still cannot be considered a complete explanation. A large part of the deaths is still caused by bacterial pneumonia. After the pandemic weakened, researchers tried to count all the deaths. The problem was that many records were incomplete and disorganized. There were places without doctors, and there were deaths where only pneumonia was written on the record, even though influenza was the initial cause. Many deaths in poor and remote communities were also not recorded. Because of this, the estimates varied. Earlier studies gave a figure of more than 20 million. Later on, other researchers raised this to between 50 million and 100 million. At present, the CDC commonly uses the estimate of no less than 50 million died worldwide, while approximately 500 million, or almost 1/3 of the population at that time, were infected. It doesn't mean that exactly 50 million people died. The actual number could be lower or higher. It's impossible to know this because many countries didn't have complete death records during that time. But even the more cautious estimates show that it killed more people than the number of soldiers who died in the entire First World War. And it wasn't just the people who were directly infected who were affected. There were pregnant women who suffered from severe influenza. Some died, had miscarriages, or gave birth prematurely. Many babies did not survive their first day of life. So the true damage of the Spanish flu cannot be seen only in the number of deaths. This includes children who were orphaned, families who lost their caregivers, and babies who could not be delivered safely. In just a short period of time, a tiny virus showed that it could destroy not only a person's lungs, but also entire families and the future of a community. It wasn't just the people who got sick who became victims of the Spanish flu. It also had a huge impact on pregnant women and unborn babies. In a study in the United States, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, researchers noticed that the number of births dropped by about 15% in the spring of 1919. The decline happened about 6 months after the worst wave. This means that many pregnant women during the height of the pandemic may have had miscarriages, especially in the early stages of their pregnancy. In an old report about more than 1,000 pregnant women who had influenza, more than 1/4 reportedly had miscarriages. But the medical records back then were incomplete, so it's hard to know the exact number. After a significant decline, the number of births rose again in late 1919 and early 1920. This showed that the pandemic did not permanently damage people's ability to have children. Communities slowly began to recover. Businesses and schools reopened. Survivors returned to work. Families tried to rebuild their lives after the war and the pandemic. But what happened left a big question. Could such a large pandemic happen again? Yes, the influenza virus continues to evolve. It can jump from animals to humans and create a new strain to which most people have little or no immunity. The world is more prepared now compared to 1918. We now have vaccines, antiviral medicines, antibiotics against some bacterial infections, modern hospitals, rapid laboratory testing, and a global system to monitor new viruses. But that doesn't mean a major pandemic is impossible. There might not be an available vaccine when a new virus first appears. It needs to be studied first, and a suitable vaccine must be developed for it. It's also possible that there won't be enough medicine, hospital beds, doctors, and nurses if too many people get sick at the same time. There's another big problem. A person can infect others even before they feel sick. So while the vaccine and medicine are still being developed, simple ways to reduce the spread are important. This includes avoiding crowded places, ensuring proper ventilation, wearing the right mask when needed, and staying at home. When someone is sick, quick isolation of those infected is important. Once the vaccine is available, fast and widespread vaccination is also crucial. That is the most important lesson from the Spanish flu. It's not enough to wait for hospitals to be overwhelmed and for deaths to increase before taking action. The government needs to tell the truth right away, listen to health experts, protect medical workers, and help ordinary people who need to stay at home. In 1918, almost 1/3 of the entire world was infected, and it is estimated that no less than 50 million died. They didn't have a flu vaccine, antiviral medicine, or the modern antibiotics that we have today. But the greatest protection doesn't just come from new technology. It also comes from quick action, accurate information, and people's cooperation. Because a virus is too small to be seen by the naked eye. But if it is underestimated, hidden, or stopped too late, it can change the lives of everyone in the world.